Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Buffalo Bills. This is Patrick Mahomes' first playoff game on the road, but is that going to matter? I'm going to get into it after this. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports. You're watching Gamescript. On today's episode, as I mentioned at the top, we're going to be going over the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Buffalo Bills, looking at a 45.5-point total with Kansas City as 2.5-point dogs. They're playing in Buffalo. Buffalo has some injury situations to be concerned about. That is going to help the Kansas City Chiefs at the point of attack where they are the strongest, and that is with the slot receiver and the tight end, as well as the running back. So I'll get into that in a second, but first, make sure to hit the like button on this video. Looking for about 15 likes to put out a shorter video closer to lock once we know some of these injury reports where I give out my 4 favorite players, including a captain. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Right now, I'm at 444 subscribers, looking for 500 by the end of the playoffs. So, got a couple weeks left to get there. Going to be producing these Gamescript episodes for every game throughout the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So, make sure to subscribe so you have access to all that. On top of that, if you subscribe, I also put out two game slate videos covering the 2-game slates, and we're going to have obviously a 2-game slate next week with the conference championships. So all sorts of content goes up, including best ball, playoff best ball content. Underdog puts out a contest for playoff best ball. We're able to draft teams just like you would with normal best ball, except you're drafting playoff teams. And it's a really fun game to play. If you sign up for Underdog using the promo code SEEK, SEEK, they are going to match you up to $100 on your first deposit. In addition to that, you can hit me up on Twitter at Pumacom, and I'll send you my rankings for the conference championships next week. So make sure to do that. Get yourself some interest in these games other than DraftKings or other than DFS. It's really fun to play playoff best ball. I have a rooting interest right now going through the teams that advanced last week in the wild card rounds. I got some teams that are well positioned going into the divisional round this week. And then on top of that, we'll go on to the conference round, and obviously the Super Bowl is where it ends. And you can have a huge rooting interest in the Super Bowl for whatever teams that you have that get through these other rounds of playoff best ball. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at the slate, looking at this Kansas City Chiefs team. As far as the injuries that the Buffalo Bills have, we're looking at Taylor Rapp is out, the safety. Linebacker Baylor Spector is out. Linebacker Christian Benford is out. Wide receiver Gabe Davis is out. And linebacker Terrell Bernard is looking doubtful. He's got an ankle. He's going to test it out before the game starts. So keep an eye on that news, because that's another linebacker. That's an important piece of the defense of the middle of the field for Buffalo. And then cornerback Teron Johnson looks like he will play. He cleared concussion protocol, so he is looking like he will play. So at least they have that going for them. So banged up Buffalo's defense. They're playing at home, the first time that they've been able to host a playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Buffalo Bills have had a lot of bad luck against the Kansas City Chiefs. They came close to beating them a couple years ago. We had the infamous coin flip game where Buffalo looked like they had that game locked up, and then Kansas City scored. I can't remember if it was a touchdown or a field goal, but they scored in the last 15 seconds of the game and ended up taking that game from Buffalo. They went into overtime. Kansas City won the coin flip. Buffalo ended up not getting a chance to come back and basically Kansas City just won the game. They scored a touchdown. They won the game. Buffalo didn't even have a chance to answer them. And then they changed the rules after that to give both teams a chance to score a touchdown or at least a possession in the beginning of the overtime round. So looking at this slate, we got Josh Allen is probably going to be the highest owned captain. Good reason for that. He's also I believe he was the number one overall scoring quarterback for fantasy this year. So he also was one of the leading touchdown scorer for quarterbacks this year. Dude scores a lot of touchdowns. He does a lot of rushing yards, and you can see it here. He had 2 touchdowns against New England. He had 2 touchdowns against the Chargers. The points that he's scoring is ridiculous. He scored 33 against Pittsburgh, 29 against Miami, 22 against New England, 25 versus the Chargers. He's got a nice little stretch there. He scored 43 against Philly. He scored 21 against Kansas City in their last matchup, 25 versus Cincy, 33 versus Tampa Bay. You know, like in the 30-point hits go on and on with Josh Allen this year. He has the highest raw point upside on the slate, and we're going to want him in our player pools. Patrick Mahomes is a different story. Patrick Mahomes is now throwing to a bunch of scrubs. Tyreek Hill left town, and they haven't really recovered as far as weapons for Patrick Mahomes. No one has elevated in the absence of Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce was his crutch last season, but Travis Kelce is old, and he has not been looking good this year. And Rashee Rice has stepped up recently, but beyond that, he's had no weapons to throw to. None of these guys can catch a ball. And basically, Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice are the only guys he can throw to. You can expect Buffalo to be well aware of that. Patrick Mahomes usually plays well with improvisation, and none of his teammates know what to do when he's improvising, except for Kelce. And apparently Rice has come around lately, and that has led to some rough weeks for Patrick Mahomes this season. He had 18 versus Miami last week. He had 13 versus Cincinnati, 18 versus Vegas. He had 20 versus New England, but you see 14 versus Buffalo in the last contest, 14 versus Green Bay the week before that, and just a bunch of like 8 points against Denver, 16 versus Miami in another game that they had against each other. He had a few good weeks in the beginning of the season, but Patrick Mahomes has been a big disappointment for fantasy this year. But he has found a way to win these games regardless. So you can't write off Patrick Mahomes. And if we're going to get an ownership discount because of how bad he's been this year, as from a fantasy perspective, then that's something that we're going to want to take advantage of. And right now, I see as far as a captain ownership, Josh Allen is about 22 and Mahomes is about 13. So maybe not necessarily a low enough number to put Mahomes in the captain spot, but Mahomes in the playoffs is not something that you want to write off, and you never know which Mahomes will show up in the playoffs. Isiah Pacheco is interesting this week. As far as the matchups go, the Bills are allowing 20.4 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. They're allowing 18.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They've been giving up 10.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, 18.2 DraftKings points a game to the slot, 13.2 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. So the best matchups on the KC side, they have the quarterback, the running back, and the tight end, all in middling matchups. As far as Buffalo's side, Kansas City is giving up 14.9 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, 24.7 DraftKings points a game to running backs, 6.8 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, not good for Stefon Diggs, 20.5 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers, better for Khalil Shakir, and 9.2 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. But something to note with tight ends is that Kansas City is also giving up, or as far as slots, Kansas City is giving up 51.8% of their receptions have gone to slot receivers. And that's a note from Rich Rebar's free article on Sharp Football Analysis. So you want to check that out before you watch or before you make your lineups, basically. As far as Pacheco goes, like that matchup isn't the best. It's a middling matchup, but it's nothing that you want to shy away from. And the last game that they played each other, let's see what he did. The last game that Pacheco played against Buffalo, he ended up having, well, I guess he was maybe he was out in that game. Yeah, because I don't see him on here for that game. So Pacheco must have been out in that first matchup. Let's check out and see what Clyde Edwards-Helaire did, so we get an idea what the running backs did against Buffalo in that first matchup. It was Week 14, and Edwards-Helaire ended up with 8.8 DraftKings points. Pacheco's a much better running back than Edwards-Helaire, but it shows that they didn't really lean on the run too much in the last matchup. As far as Rashee Rice has that beneficial matchup that I was mentioning earlier with a lot of these linebackers and middle of the field defense going to be out this week. That's going to be good for the slot, and Rashee Rice should be able to benefit from that. He's been coming on recently. It was a pain in the ass to figure out which of these receivers to stack with Patrick Mahomes in the beginning of the season, but as you can see, from week about 12 on, Rashee Rice stepped up. 27 points against Las Vegas, 14 versus Green Bay, 19 versus Buffalo. New England, he had 24 DraftKings points. He had 11.7 against Las Vegas, 20 versus Cincinnati, and 30 versus Miami. So Rashee Rice has been the guy that has stepped up. And the first time I've seen receiver elevate in this offense beyond Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So that's looking good for Rashee Rice. As far as Steph Diggs, he's got a horrible matchup. And on top of that, he just isn't cutting it lately. He's not doing anything lately. 9 targets last week, 8 targets the week before that, 7 targets the week before that, 8 targets the week before that. And the highest point total that he had was 15.7 DraftKings points. And he has a tough matchup. And he traditionally, on top of that, does not do well against Kansas City's defense. So Steph Diggs is a guy that will be more of a contrarian play this week. If you see that the ownership on him is going to be super low, and right now I'm seeing about 10% captain ownership, that's still too expensive for me. And seeing his total ownership just at about 50%. So both of those are pretty high given the struggles that Diggs has had recently and the struggles that he's had against Kansas City. But I still would leave him in my player pool, but he would be a guy, maybe if the ownership, we got an indication that it was going to be a little bit lower than the projected ownership. If he was 30% projected ownership, then I would say that Steph Diggs is a good play, but 50%, given his struggles, maybe he's a guy that we stay away from. Gabe Davis is out this week. So, between Steph Diggs, getting covered by Snead, most likely. One thing, too, that Warren Sharp mentioned in one of his podcasts that he did, Warren Sharp was talking about the referee situation, and they don't call a lot of pass interference plays. And that is going to be beneficial to the cornerback Snead, who is going to be on Diggs. And Diggs is going to struggle potentially with not getting those calls and the cornerback being able to be more physical against him. So Diggs just has a bunch of things going against him. But like I said, like Diggs is an ownership play, whether or not you want to go heavier on him, but he's expensive, showing him at 8,800 on the flex and 13K for the captain. So maybe not as expensive as he normally is, but still he's a risky play even with the discount. So we move on to James Cook. James Cook is the guy who has the best matchup in this game because the Kansas City defense has given up that 24.7 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. They've been vulnerable to running backs all season, and James Cook exploited that in their first matchup. He ended up having, 25 DraftKings points in that game, and that was during that little stretch where James Cook was looking really good, but then they put him back in the bottle for these past few weeks. But they're going to need him in this game because they're going to want to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field as much as possible. And you're going for old school, defensive-minded coach of the Bills to look to run the ball as much as they can in this one. Let's see. Moving on to Kelce. Kelce has had a down year. You can see several weeks in there with single-digit fantasy outputs. Not really good. He's got a better social life right now than he does a playing life. He has not been really good as far as fantasy output. But Kelce's another one of those dudes that could pop off at any minute. And he's had a lot of success against the Bills in the past. And don't be surprised if, that reflexive memory kicks in for Travis Kelce and he suddenly looks dominant against the Bills today. As far as the matchup goes, it's a middling matchup for Kelce, with the Bills giving up 13.2 DraftKings points a game to that tight end position. So let's see what else we got here. Yeah, the loss of the linebackers is just going to be huge for Kelce's matchup. So if you want to fade Kelce, you're basically hoping for Teron Johnson and Bernard to both be in, but Bernard is not looking good to return. So yeah, it's gonna be a rough one for the Bills defense against some of these weapons that Kansas City has. Let's go ahead and take a look at the projected distribution. It looks like 4-2 in favor of Buffalo is going to be 26% owned. 4-2 in favor of Kansas City is going to be 23% owned. So you don't really have an edge there. So you can really take your pick on which team that you like most and kind of go with building game scripts around that. Looks like the best place to get your discount in ownership is going to be at the captain position, unless you want to go 5-1 builds. Each of those is going to be very low owned. As far as the captains go, I think the best value that I see is probably like Kelce, Rice, Mahomes, Allen, Diggs. They're all 10 plus owned, 10 plus %. James Cook is going to be the guy with the best value, as well as Isiah Pacheco. Both those guys have good value at the captain position. So maybe we'll get started with doing that. I'll get Cook in there since I just talked about him already. And let's take a look at Kincaid. Kincaid is he's a guy that should do okay in this game. The Chiefs have been good against the tight end position, but Kincaid's been getting targeted downfield a lot more recently, especially with Gabe Davis out. And I think that Gabe Davis being out is really benefiting Dalton Kincaid because it's getting him those targets 20-plus yards downfield. And Kincaid is really the guy that they want as the second receiving weapon in this offense. And I think that that's going to be a good setup for Kincaid this week, especially with no Gabe Davis, as I mentioned. As far as what they're giving up on the Kansas City defense, they've been giving up just 6.4 yards per target, which is second best in the league, and 3.4% touchdown rate, ninth best in the league to tight ends. That again is from that Rich Rebar article. So you get a lot of good information in that. Definitely recommend checking that out. Moving down, we got Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is out. We got Khalil Shakir. Shakir has benefited with these Gabe Davis as well. You saw him got like 19.5 DraftKings points a couple weeks ago. He had 12.1 last week. He's been getting targeted. Not a ton of targets. He got 3 targets last week, 6 targets versus Miami, 4 versus New England, 3 versus the Chargers. So not getting a ton of targets, but Shakir should be in a good spot as far as if Diggs is going to be bottled up, then he should see a decent amount of his of targets, because Allen's going to need to throw to somebody, and I think that's going to set up basically Shakir to have that advantage. And as I mentioned, 51.8% of the receptions allowed by Kansas City have come to the slot position, and that is where Shakir is running most of his routes. Tyler Bass, I have to check the weather real quick. Let me check that before I give an opinion on Tyler Bass. Let's see what the latest weather is saying on this game, because if there's going to be a lot of wind, we don't want to be too heavy on the kickers. Sounds like it's going to be cold with a bit of breeze. This is according to Kevin Roth over at Roto Grinders. Temperature should be around 20 degrees, 10% or 10 mile an hour sustained wind, gusts around 20 miles. So it should be okay. It's going to feel very cold for these players, but it shouldn't hurt the kicking game too much. So Tyler Bass will be in play. He has not done a whole lot recently, but he has the ability to pop off for a decent amount of points. He only had 8 DraftKings points last time that they faced Kansas City, so keep that in mind. Butker, last game that they faced Buffalo, ended up with 5 DraftKings points. So it was a 17-20 score in that one. Buffalo ended up winning that game, but don't be surprised if this one ends up being a much higher scoring game. It's almost like divisional opponents, because they faced each other once already this year. They're going to be able to adjust to each other's defenses. They're very familiar with each other because they play each other, it feels like, every year. And with the situation currently, I think that this might be a higher scoring game with what's at stake. And Mahomes playing on the road. Buffalo's going to be able to play well in front of their home audience. And I don't know if Kansas City is going to be able to keep up with them, but you never know. Like, Kansas City might be able to pull it off, because we've seen Rashee Rice kind of coming around recently. Kelce's still slowed down though, and Buffalo's got a good run D, but they have been allowing those middling points to the running back throughout the season. But recently they have been really good against running backs. Looking at Justin Watson, he's probably the only other receiver to even consider in this one for Kansas City. And even then, like, he's just like, he's a expensive scrub. He had 2 targets last week, 1 target the week before that, 3 before that. Like, so he doesn't get targeted enough, on top of being like way down on the pecking order as far as targets. Bills and Chiefs defense are both in play. Both these quarterbacks have been mistake prone, especially this year. And the Bills defense has shown a propensity to be able to put up points, even though that they have been the walking wounded lately. As far as the Chiefs, like, their defense is one of the best in the league. And Josh Allen is not mistake. He's very mistake prone, but he's not one to shy away from with a defense, knowing that he could throw, like a couple pick sixes in the game. Dawson Knox, probably not going to play much of Dawson Knox, especially with Kincaid. And the matchup in itself is already difficult. So Dawson Knox is not really on my list. Sky Moore is on IR. Latavius Murray, not really interested there. I think if I was leaning Murray or Edwards-Helaire, I might lean more towards Helaire, because I think he just gets used more than Murray, and he's more effective when he gets used. He had that one good game against New England a few weeks ago. I think that's when Pacheco was out for a few weeks, but Edwards-Helaire has shown an ability to play when he's needed. So I wouldn't necessarily shy away from him. He's at 2,600, so he's going to be a guy on our radar for when we need salary saver. As far as these other salary savers, Noah Gray's really the only other one with those linebacker injuries to Buffalo. He's at 2K. Leonard Fournette, he was inactive last week. Bills cut Leonard Fournette from the practice squad on Tuesday. So it looks like he might be cut from the team. So not really sure if he got re-signed to the practice squad, but looking at Hardman has a history with Mahomes at least. He had a bad game last week. He had 3 targets, but he only had 1 reception. Week before that, he had 11 targets. He only had 6 receptions. So another one of these guys that hasn't been catching the ball. I think it would probably lean more towards, let's see, Richie James might be interesting, given that Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore are both going to be out. Richie James had some big years, like a big year with the Giants, and then he went to Kansas City. He's kind of been a forgotten man, but 2 targets last week, 2 targets the week before that. He had 3 versus Vegas. But, I'm just really not interested in any of these scrubs. But the good thing about James is at least he's only $600. Sherfield, same situation, except he's on Buffalo. He had 4 targets versus Miami a couple weeks ago, 3 targets versus New England. So he's in play at least, and he's only $400. So those might be the guys that I'd be interested in as far as the cheap guys would be Sherfield and Richie James. But that's pretty disgusting. So you want to try to, stay balanced, I think, in your builds this week to not have to go dumpster diving there. Let's get Allen in there. Mahomes, I think we can fade Mahomes, but let's get Rice in there. And let's see. Let's get Shakir in there too. That gives us 5,200 left per guy. We're left with 2 spots remaining. Let's see. We could go with, if we went with a guy like Kincaid, that leaves us with 4,100. That leaves us with the Bills or the Chiefs D. So if you wanted to go in that direction, you can get a decent amount of weapons on the team, and then still have enough to put one of the defenses in. If you wanted to go away from Kincaid and go with Kelce, leaves you with 2,700. You're in that Edwards-Helaire range. If you wanted to go Kelce over Rice, we could go with Kelce there. And that puts us at 6,100 per guy. That situation, we could put in Kincaid and have 5,900 left over. So we have, options of the kickers in that situation. That might be the best direction that I can think of that we could go in, as far as gives us a potential 4-2 Buffalo Bill, because we could put in Harrison Butker as the kicker. We could put in Watson as that other receiver. So that's a build right there using Cook as a captain, and I like it because we got Allen throwing to Kincaid and Shakir. James Cook is having a lot of success on the ground, and then we got Kelce on the Chiefs side, and then whoever we choose, like whether it's a kicker, maybe the Chiefs D we want to play, or the Bills D or something like that. I don't shy away from putting Allen in there along with the Chiefs D, because Allen could obviously put up a bunch of points, and the Chiefs D could also capitalize on a bunch of mistakes. So I wouldn't shy away from that. As far as my other option as a captain, maybe we go with Pacheco. If we go with Pacheco at captain, maybe we're going with Rice here. You get Allen in there. Let's go down to Shakir because he's cheap. Leaves us with 7,200. If we go with, you can't go Cook there. That's a issue. So maybe we go with Rice and go down to Cook. And then we're talking 4,300 per guy. If we wanted to go with that Chiefs D at that point, maybe we go with the Chiefs D, and then we have 4,800 left. Oops, I don't know. Knox got in there. Then we have like Butker as an option. That would give us a 3-3 build. So I don't, you're not really struggling if you go 3-3 versus 2-2 because it's not going to be that much higher owned. So it gives you some options there. If we want to go a different direction, and let's say we want to go with Diggs, let's say that we think that Diggs is going to, snap out of it and have a big game for the playoffs at home. Let's put Allen in there. Let's get Cook in there. And let's get Kelce because we want to have at least Kelce or Rice. I think you want to have at least Kelce or Rice in every lineup. Let's put Shakir. And that is going to leave us with 3,200. So maybe we get rid of Shakir. Maybe this is going to be a low-scoring game. So maybe we go with the Bills D. And that leaves 4,600. We go with like Watson or the Chiefs D or, Dawson Knox, something like that. So we definitely have a few options if we want to go in that direction. If you like, maybe Mahomes better than Allen, and you want to go, maybe Rashee Rice over Stefon Diggs, we can go Mahomes to Rice. Maybe instead of Kelce, we're putting in Pacheco. That's going to hurt us on our salary. So maybe we take out Cook in this scenario if they're playing from behind, and maybe we get Shakir in there and take out that Bills D. I feel like we need to play Cook. Cook is almost like a must play, I feel like, today. That leaves us with $1,000. That's when we're going scrub diving. So we have, like those options of, I just don't like this build, especially if we're replacing Allen with Mahomes. Let's take out Shakir there. Let's put in Chiefs defense. We got Cook, and maybe we can put in like Hardy or Hardman or a guy like that, but that's basically where it leaves you. But I like the Cook builds. They make the most sense to me. They leave it more open for doing good lineups, like doing lineups where you're not scrub diving and not putting up like these crappy lineups. So that's kind of the direction that I'm leaning in. Hit up the like button, looking for 15. I'll put up a shorter video a little bit closer to lock with more complete thoughts on, like the guys that I like the most. And then make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. I need about 50 more to hit that 500 mark. So very close. And make sure to sign up for Underdog. Use the promo code SEEK, SEEK, and they will match you up to $100 on your first deposit. On top of that, hit me up on Twitter at Pumacom, and I'll send you my rankings. So good luck, guys. I will see you a little bit later on, and let's win this one.